welcome to the Prospecting Show. Today is June 2nd, and we have Derek Davies on the show. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. So to kind of start things off, maybe kind of give the listeners a little bit of background, where you came from, where you started, and what company you run now.
Sure. So my parents started a business back like in 1989. It was a call center, and they've had it for, so about 31 years. And I've just grown up around it my entire life. It was next to the house that I grew up in an office slash garage, kind of renovated into it. And then it grew from there to other locations just as time went on. And just growing up around it and being with my parents and going to meetings and hearing how they run the business, I just kind of grew into it and grew a passion for it myself. And now today I am running the business, and my parents, they still are involved somewhat, but they kind of have gone off and done their own thing. So I kind of stepped into it. I went off to college for 3.5 years in Austin, Texas, and got a business degree. And I came back and tried to apply that degree to what I know and tried to, advance the business and also put some of those strategies together to make things more efficient, make the technology better, and try to, incorporate as much as I could.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? They talk about the degree, and one of the things we talk a lot about on this podcast is the need for education, right? We talk a little bit about formal education at the post-secondary level and what people have done there, and then also the application to the business. So would you say that you have made some type of substantial change because you have the degree, or do you think that it's more just that you kind of understand how to problem solve and you've kind of worked your way through improving the business?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that you need a business degree to run a business or to necessarily even start one, but I think it definitely does help you see things in a different way. I know growing up, I'd always been around my parents, and both of them didn't go to college, and they have started a couple of successful businesses. So my dad's philosophy was, you don't need college. I can be successful without that. Whereas I felt the same way in some aspects, but I still wanted that experience and wanted to see, what it was all about. And I think that, it definitely does help to have a different experience. I know I've always worked for my family growing up, but I also wanted to get another job with a different boss that was not related to me, to see how someone else runs a business. I think that's important to, get a diversified education and not just hear it from one person in your family. And so I think that also led me to great experiences for working for someone else and different ideas that my family didn't have or that were foreign to them. And instead of just having the routine old call center answering service, I was incorporating, different ideas based on, the human resources aspect of it and how to manage people, talking to people, communications. And the place that I worked was a restaurant, so I kind of understood, customer service, hospitality. And then when I went off to school, that made me also understand things. I went to school with a lot of different people from all different backgrounds, like anyone maybe in college, but I think my college, there was a lot more foreign people or people, from different states rather than just all coming from a certain area, like a local college may have. And it helped me learn different ways, and especially having different professors who, some of them had their own businesses or had worked in different areas that were different than what I was used to. It's helped me to understand that and expand our client base by understanding a little bit more about their business than maybe my parents would have if they hadn't ever, connected with those kind of people.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point too, right? At the end of the day, there's a few different reasons that people go to school, right? Some people think it's just about the degree. Some people say it's about networking. Some people say it's like you're talking about, where it's exposure to the other opportunities and the people that exist there. And I think the interesting thing for both you and I, as we both grew up in entrepreneurial families, to work for the family company. And when you work for a family-run company to start, then go to school, and then come back and work in the family company, you realize how complex a business actually is, right? When you see how smoothly things can run, or how many different tasks are going on, it's not something you can really teach somebody how to do, right? A little bit of that work is experiential, a little bit of it is mentorship driven, and a little bit of it is just, hey, you got to do it yourself. So what would you say in your mind, because you talk with a lot of other businesses and you guys have an answering call center service, what would you say the number one problem is that you see with your customers?
The problem that I see with our customers?
Yeah, so like they must be coming to you, right? They're asking for the service that you have. Like they typically probably have some type of difficulty in their business, and since you get to talk to them and your team gets to talk to them, what kind of problem are you guys solving for your customers?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest problem that I see is that people, especially now, like payroll costs are big. So it's if they hire someone up front to maybe answer their phones during the day, if they would use us for daylight hours, that is a cost. I mean, it's still not something that's in the six figures, but it's still something that costs a lot, especially if you're paying PTO, health benefits, any other various benefits. It definitely does add up. So sometimes it's nice to utilize a service that you're paying a lot less for, and you can still get the same result, especially now that people are more remote, or as the country is continuing to globalize and people expand their markets to not just be in the local community. It's not that big of a deal sometimes to have someone, if you're just making phone calls, to divert that, especially with the technology these days. It's sometimes hard to tell who you're actually talking to and where they're located. But for our after hours customers, some use us for both, for all hours or both. And our after hours customers, it's getting the call to the correct person. So people, like the society we live in, everybody wants things now, and they don't like to wait for things. And let's just say if you have a medical account, for instance, everyone has a different definition of what's an emergency. Something may be super urgent to you, which is really not urgent to someone else. So it's kind of hard to determine that. So instead of like doctors who may be very busy, just working on call in a hospital, and then their clients are calling them about things like, oh, I need a routine prescription refill, or I have a question about something. We kind of come in first, we're the middleman, and ask them, is this really an emergency? And, does it fit our emergency list? And then we determine that and send that out to the doctor to respond to at their leisure. And it's the same with any clients. For instance, property management is another one. Someone could have a toilet that's not working, and then they call in and say, hey, my toilet's not working. But for us, we kind of say, okay, well, do you have one toilet in your house? Do you have two toilets in your house? Can it wait until tomorrow? So we're kind of that middleman trying to help in that aspect to determine if it's something that, is really urgent and we need to bother that person for. Because really having an answering service it's kind of a luxury to have someone take your calls for you. There's a lot of problems that people have that they
common, right?
Find that there's
Very
a need
common.
for an answering service. A lot too are sales. I mean, my brother's business uses it, and I can't tell you the amount of calls that he receives past like store hours. A typical business, works 9 to 5, but so do other people. So if they're working in these other businesses and they need to call you after work because they haven't had a chance to call, then you're missing a sale sometimes. And how many times, in your personal opinion, have you called somewhere if you had an issue with your house and the company doesn't answer, so you move on to the next one until someone answers? So that's, you're losing business as a customer. Yeah, So if someone picks up the phone and they might not even say that they're that business, they could say, I am with their answering service, but I will get this out to someone to give you a call back. That person may be less likely to call another company because they know they're going to get a call back. And you can definitely see like you saving customers and your sales increasing by doing that.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point around the fact that there are certain businesses that have that 9 to 5 kind of style, but then there's also that more of emergent kind of services where you're talking about someone who owns, properties and they have to, attend to these people after hours. But then there's also kind of the first point you made, which is if you hire someone to answer the phone on your own, you're probably going to be paying, a substantial amount of money with potential overtime, with paid time off, with other healthcare benefits, and that really starts to add up. So at the end of the day, if you can outsource that to a fraction, you can have one person on your team who's able to take calls for 4 or 5 different businesses, then you fractionalized that labor and ultimately driven down the cost for everybody else and allowed you to make a profit in that business. So I think it's really, we talk a lot about outsourcing in our business, and we have a bunch of people in the Philippines that help support our business, and it's really for 2 reasons, right? One is total coverage, and 2 is a combination of cost, right? Because the cost is a little bit lower. So with you guys, it's interesting because you're fractionalizing the labor that you have, which ultimately makes you guys have a business that you can expand rapidly. Where do you see phone services and answering services kind of going over the next 5 years, with everybody now realizing like, hey, maybe I don't need a whole office in New York City or Pittsburgh or wherever they live? What are the next steps?
Yeah, so lately, due to all the COVID pandemic, we've seen an increase in the calls, our sales calls. A lot of people are, not in the office, and it's a way for them to have their phones still answered, because some businesses haven't stopped, or they just can't answer them in the office, or someone's not always there. So we can route them to the correct people. We've had to, pivot from a traditional answering service. When my parents started it, it was mainly, we did 24/7, so we always were getting calls, but the majority were after hours. And then we kind of ventured into a call center to do billing and customer service for larger corporations and companies as well. And then I kind of helped pivot it as well into, doing many different things for offices, even just being someone at the front desk to route the calls to who they need to go to. And it seems like that's going to be more and more common because people are trying to, if you see like Facebook, they say they want people to work from home now and really not come back into the office, and they don't know if they ever will. And people are saving so much money on rent and all the, overhead costs for that they see it's better for their business to do that. So I think that's why we also are seeing an increase, because if we can be someone's personal administrator to answer the phone and do certain other tasks, since we're very customizable, I think this is the way forward. Whereas people kind of felt, the answering service industry, call center industry is kind of slowly going away because of AI. But I think people will still always want that personal touch, especially local companies too, like to hear from local people. We do answer nationwide, but I think that's always a nice touch to have.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely true. And some of the businesses are starting to open their eyes to the other options that exist out there, right? Kind of like you were saying, some people look at call centers and think, well, that's not really something that we're still using, and that's kind of old school. But at the end of the day, if you have a kind of custom product or custom service or custom solution that is maybe not something AI can take care of, or maybe not something that you can outsource to a different country, it is sometimes good to have that local kind of touch and have that business like yourself that's able to handle those calls. When you're looking at, the kinds of businesses that you're serving on the sales arm, are you finding that they are using that service more, or is it more on the operational side? Like, what's kind of the split between sales and marketing versus operations with you guys?
Well, I think that like the most of the thinking, like where are clients coming from? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, no, I'm asking more a little bit more about the way that people are using your service, right? So there's some people who are probably using your service just to field operational, like support type calls, right? Where it's just like, hey, we have inbound calls and it's more of a support. But then you talked about examples where people are getting calls after hours and that could potentially be a sales call. What proportion do you find that you guys are doing more operational calls versus more sales calls?
I think it's very mixed. I'd say almost 50-50. It just depends, because even clients that we have, let's just say a contractor HVAC company, 50% of those calls are sales, but 50% are, hey, the technician hasn't shown up, or hey, there was a problem, I'm still having the problem, or hey, I'm looking, I have a question in regards to it before you come out. So it really is 50-50. It just depends on the client. There are some that we just do incoming sales leads. We've answered for Shark Tank companies, like people that were on the show Shark Tank. We do like infomercials, things on QVC or pledge lines with NPR. And as things come in, we handle those, and they're only inbound sales leads for the most part. But it just depends on what kind of client you're talking about, because if it's, let's just say, a government authority, like a housing authority, it's not typically sales. So there are a lot of work orders and operational calls. It just varies. But I mean, in the US, everything is about money and business. So I think that most of the calls are generating something.
Yeah, no, and that's true. I guess it is somewhat industry specific, kind of like you talked about with the HVAC guys. They're going to be having a good mix of sales and operations. But if you go to like a housing authority or like property management on a rental side, it's probably not as much sales. It's probably more operational, just to get something fixed or operate that business. Where do you see you guys going as a company going forward? Like, you have all these remote workers, these people that have small companies, big companies, but they're all kind of going remote, and, sales and business still has to happen, right? So where do you see you guys fitting into the market or pivoting as time goes on here?
So at the moment, I think that we're at a good spot currently. A lot of smaller answering services, they sell out sometimes to these larger businesses that are coming in and buying them, and they don't just deal with answering services, they deal with all kinds of different technology fields. So people end up sometimes not liking them, because then they outsource outside of the US, where a lot of our customers, want someone in the US answering the calls. And they like to know, like where you're located, who you are, maybe even meet them. Especially with government contracts, a lot of the time they want to work with U.S. businesses or U.S. employees. So I think it just, at the moment, everything is going good in that aspect. Like, it's still needed. We're still always getting sales. But I think in the future, a lot of people are going to move towards AI things and call routing. I mean, a lot of the stuff you can do online, it is pretty amazing what you can and can't do. But at the moment, there are still limitations, and I don't know, how far away we really are from that. Everyone has their own ideas of, when that's coming. I mean, we have self-driving cars, but they're not, out to market yet. And people always are very, well, maybe they'll be in a couple of years. Maybe it's, when is it actually going to come? The technology's there. It's just how to, launch that. So I know that a lot of other answering services, we kind of all work together. We have an online group that we all talk in about the technology changes and, what's needed in the market. And like, for instance, it just varies on every industry. If you're in the medical industry, they really want HIPAA secure technology, and they want to make it easier to contact each other. I mean, doctors went from having beepers in the hospital and pagers because they don't have a lot of reception in there and it's something easy they can carry around, to now they're using HIPAA secured messaging apps that they can communicate with each other. And now, like, it seems like the thing is, a lot of people are asking for like the information that we're taking to go into a like CRM software that they can, implement on their end, so they're not doing double the work. It's all about efficiency and how we can create less work for their office. So the more features and things we can offer, the better.
Yeah, and that will make you guys a more robust service too, right? Kind of like you're talking about, if you can create a solution, like people typically don't buy features, right? They buy benefits and then solutions as a whole, or they're buying, solutions to their problems. And I think you're right. There's going to be a lot of people, like you look at all the small healthcare offices, right? Chiropractors, physical therapists, even massage therapists. If they're a single member practice, it might be useful for you guys to offer a scheduling service to them where it's like, listen, the patient calls in, wants to schedule an appointment. That service can basically be done through an answering platform instead of that provider having to like run back and forth between the patient and answering the phone. And they're ultimately going to be paying for a full-time in-house person to do that service anyway. So it probably makes sense to work with you guys. Yeah. And
exactly. And a lot of...
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just saying a lot of people too, like we have features that are available now that people still aren't ready for yet. For instance, web chat. I myself love web chat because I can multitask. If I'm, in the middle of something, or like that, I can do it on my computer without having to call and, be disruptive and wait on hold forever. I can just go on and ask my question and get it solved. And I think a lot of people do like that, but some older generations, aren't interested in that. They're used to picking up the phone. It's easier for them. It's something that's kind of foreign to them, or they don't know that's available. And that's kind of where we're at the moment. There's some people that are interested in things like web chat. It's just like telehealth. Telehealth is a new thing that's been out for a while, but no one's really put that fully to market, or it's not really become so popularized. But until COVID happened, and now it's very popular. They've seen such an increase in telehealth appointments. And I know that there's a lot of limitations to it, but it's still something that's very efficient to people, and they were kind of forced into it. But it's just interesting to see what will happen and how the market will change.
Yeah. And so to kind of wrap up the podcast session here, if somebody was interested in learning more about the different kinds of services you have, the call center versus the answering service and all that, what's the best way for them to reach you?
So the best way to reach us is they can go through our website, and they can send an email through there, like an inquiry about their services, or they can call our main phone number, which is 412-369-4700, and they can just say that they're interested in starting sales, and they'll connect you with one of our people from the sales team to discuss what their needs are, because everyone's is different, and how we can help them or integrate with their technology or office.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know it's been super valuable here, and I think you guys are really still on the front edge of some of the opportunities that are going to exist, in this post-COVID era. I think there's a lot of people who are going to be making some transitions and looking at their headcount and figuring out how they can outsource some of these very specific skills that you guys have. So I appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you for your time, and hopefully we get some awesome feedback here from the listeners.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.